A man who can be bought is easy to replace, but a man who refuses to sell his dignity can change the future of an entire family. The ballroom inside the Whitmore estate shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers that had watched generations of America's wealth celebrate victories, mergers, and carefully arranged marriages. Every seat was filled with politicians, CEOs, investors, and old family friends who believed they already knew how the evening would end. Charles Whitmore, the 70-year-old billionaire whose name appeared on hospitals, museums, and skylines across the country, stood beneath a spotlight with the confidence of a man who had spent decades shaping other people's destinies. His daughter, Evelyn Whitmore, stood only a few feet away in a midnight blue evening gown, calm enough to fool everyone except the people who truly knew her. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Charles had announced weeks earlier that before the Whitmore Foundation's annual gala concluded, Evelyn would publicly introduce the man she intended to marry. 3 accomplished men waited near the stage, each from families as wealthy and influential as the Whitmores themselves. Cameras were ready. Reporters smiled. Guests whispered predictions over expensive glasses of champagne. Every detail had been arranged except for one. Evelyn had never promised she would choose any of them. Charles raised his glass. "Tonight," he said with a practiced smile, "my daughter will make a decision that honors our family's future." Applause rolled across the room. Grant Holloway adjusted the cuff of his tailored tuxedo and smiled with quiet confidence. Everyone assumed he had already won. Then Evelyn stepped away from the stage. At first, no one understood why she was walking toward the back of the ballroom instead of toward the 3 men waiting for her. Conversations faded. Cameras turned. She passed rows of elegantly dressed guests until she reached the service entrance where contractors had spent the afternoon repairing part of the aging wooden dance floor before the gala began. Standing there, wearing a rented black suit that fit just well enough to avoid attention, was Malcolm Reed. His hands still carried faint traces of sawdust that no amount of scrubbing had completely removed. Beside him stood his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, wearing a simple white dress with carefully polished shoes that had belonged to a cousin the year before. She held her father's hand with complete trust, unaware that hundreds of strangers had suddenly fixed their eyes on them. Evelyn stopped in front of Malcolm. For one silent heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Grant frowned. Charles slowly lowered his glass. Someone near the front laughed, assuming this had to be part of the evening's entertainment. Then Evelyn reached for Malcolm's hand. "I choose him," she said softly, yet every microphone in the ballroom carried her words into absolute silence. The room seemed to forget how to breathe. Grant's smile disappeared first. Several guests exchanged confused looks. A woman whispered that the billionaire's daughter must have mistaken the contractor for someone else. Charles stared at Malcolm from across the ballroom, as though trying to solve an impossible equation. His eyes dropped briefly toward Lily, then returned to Malcolm's face. "Do you even know who this man is?" Charles finally asked, his voice steady but colder than before. Malcolm never answered the question. Instead, he knelt in front of Lily, gently straightened the ribbon in her hair, and smiled as if the thousands of curious eyes around them did not exist. "You doing okay, sweetheart?" he asked quietly. Lily nodded. "I'm okay, Daddy." Malcolm stood again, meeting Evelyn's eyes for the first time that evening. There was no excitement in his expression, no hunger for wealth, no trace of triumph. Only concern. "Before you choose me," he said calmly, "there's something you deserve to know." Evelyn's confident expression shifted ever so slightly. Whatever she expected him to say, it wasn't those words. Across the ballroom, Charles narrowed his eyes. Grant took one cautious step forward. Every guest leaned in, waiting for the truth that was about to change far more than a single family's future. 3 weeks earlier, Malcolm Reed woke at 5:24, 6 minutes before the alarm on his nightstand could disturb the quiet of the small 2-bedroom house he shared with his daughter. At 39, he had learned to value those few silent minutes before the day began asking things from him. He moved carefully through the hallway and entered the kitchen, where the first gray light of morning rested against a framed photograph of Naomi beside the window. Her smile had not changed in 6 years. Malcolm looked at it while the coffee brewed, then opened Lily's lunchbox and packed apple slices, a peanut butter sandwich cut into a heart, and the chocolate chip cookie she always claimed she saved for last. On the counter beside him sat an unopened mortgage notice and 2 medical bills left from Naomi's final year. The house payment was already 12 days late. Malcolm read the amount once, folded the notice, and placed it beneath the others without complaint. The Haven house repair contract would cover most of what he owed if the work stayed on schedule. It was not rescue. It was work, and Malcolm trusted work more than promises. Lily came downstairs in purple pajamas, carrying the stuffed rabbit she had owned since preschool. "You remembered the apples?" she asked. "Every single slice." He fixed one loose braid while she ate breakfast, then drove her to Jefferson Elementary in his aging pickup truck. Before she closed the passenger door, Lily leaned back inside. "You will be here after school, right?" Malcolm smiled. "Same place as always." She nodded because in her 8 years, he had never given her a reason to doubt him. By 8:30, Malcolm was unloading lumber outside Haven House, a community center in Atlanta that offered tutoring, meals, and temporary support to families who had nowhere else to turn. The building needed more than cosmetic repairs. Inside the activity room, a brown water stain stretched nearly 20 feet across the ceiling, crossing 2 support beams that the project documents claimed had already been reinforced. Malcolm climbed his ladder, pressed one thumb against the softened wood, and frowned. He checked the work order again. The contractor code printed at the top ended in 47. The faded sign left behind by the crew that had supposedly worked there ended in 74. One reverse number could be a clerical error. Combined with untreated wood and freshwater damage, it felt like something else. Around 10 o'clock, 3 black sport utility vehicles entered the parking lot. A small media team stepped out first, followed by Evelyn Whitmore. Malcolm recognized her from local business coverage, but she did not move through the building like someone seeing it for the first time. She greeted the receptionist, Maria, by name, asked Mr. Collins about his recent knee surgery, and stopped to speak with 2 volunteers she remembered from the previous winter. Her concern appeared genuine. That made the paperwork harder to understand. Evelyn entered the activity room while an administrator explained that the renovation had been completed ahead of schedule. Malcolm looked down from the ladder. "Completed?" The administrator stiffened. "According to the final report." Malcolm climbed down and held out the work order. "Then the report is wrong." Evelyn turned toward him, surprised more than offended. "Our office received signed confirmation from licensed contractors." Malcolm pointed toward the ceiling. "That wood was never reinforced. The stain runs almost 20 feet, and the contractor code on this document does not match the code left by the crew." The room grew quiet. Evelyn stepped closer and examined the paper herself. "Are you certain?" "I am certain the roof does not care what anyone signed." His voice remained even, without accusation. "Someone may have made a mistake. But until we know, children should not be spending time under that section." Evelyn looked from the numbers to the ceiling. She had arrived believing the project was finished. Now she saw a discoloration spreading beyond the fresh paint, a thin seam where damp would have begun to separate, and Malcolm standing beneath it with the calm certainty of a man who did not need to embarrass anyone to prove his point. Before she could respond, Lily entered with Mrs. June Carter after an early dismissal at school. She ran to Malcolm and wrapped both arms around his waist. Then she noticed how still he had become and followed his eyes toward the ceiling. "Daddy gets real quiet when something is wrong," she said. Evelyn looked up again. Outside, the bright Atlanta sky had darkened without anyone noticing. The first low roll of thunder moved across the building, and this time the ceiling seemed to answer. The thunder rolled again, closer this time, and Malcolm looked up just as a faint crack appeared along the seam above the activity room. The sound that followed was not loud, but it was enough to make him step away from the ladder and study the ceiling with new urgency. Somewhere inside the old structure, wood shifted under pressure. "Everyone needs to move out of this room now," he said. His voice was calm, but there was no hesitation in it. One of the administrators glanced at the signed inspection packet still tucked beneath his arm. "The building was cleared by an engineer last month. We do not want to frighten the children over a little rain." Malcolm pointed toward the widening seam. "That is not a little rain problem. The braces above us were supposed to be replaced, and they were not. There are no fresh drill marks, no new fasteners, and no installation scars on the wood. Whatever that report says, the work was never done." The administrator opened his mouth to object, but Evelyn spoke first. "Move everyone to the front lobby," she said. Now, her decision changed the room. Volunteers stopped waiting for permission and began guiding children toward the hallway in small groups. Malcolm asked them not to run and assigned 2 adults to each doorway, so nobody would be overlooked. Rain began striking the windows in heavy sheets, turning the afternoon outside into a gray blur. Lily reached for her father's hand, but Malcolm knelt beside her before she could speak. "I need you to stay with Mrs. Carter and help count everyone who comes out. Can you do that for me?" Lily swallowed her worry and nodded. "I can count." "Good. Make sure nobody gets missed." Mrs. June Carter took Lily's hand and led her toward the lobby while Malcolm moved from room to room, checking closets, restrooms, and the small reading corner behind the stage. Evelyn followed the volunteers, calling each child's name from the attendance sheet as they passed. By the time the last group reached the front lobby, water had begun slipping through the damaged ceiling and spreading across the floor in narrow streams. 22, Lily announced, looking at the list Mrs. Carter held. "There are supposed to be 23. Malcolm immediately looked toward the office near the main exit. A teenage volunteer who had been sorting donated books was still inside, gathering her backpack. He crossed the short distance, called her name, and guided her out without raising his voice. 23, Lily said when they returned. Only then did she breathe again. Evelyn turned toward the entrance, ready to follow the others outside, when she noticed several financial storage boxes stacked inside the office beside the exit. They were not deep inside the building, and one had already begun absorbing water that ran beneath the door. She reached in and pulled the nearest box toward her, but a metal filing cabinet had shifted slightly on the wet floor, pressing against the door and narrowing the opening. "Leave it," Malcolm called from the hallway. "It is not worth getting trapped." "It is right here," Evelyn answered, trying to slide the box through the gap. Another low groan moved through the ceiling. Malcolm returned, not because of the files, but because Evelyn was still inside. He braced the door with one hand, shifted the edge of the cabinet just enough to clear the opening, and pulled the box into the hallway. "That is the only one," he said firmly. Evelyn looked at the remaining boxes, then at his face, and nodded. Together they moved toward the lobby as rainwater followed behind them. Outside beneath the covered entrance, Lily counted everyone again with Mrs. Carter. When Malcolm appeared, she ran toward him but stopped just short, remembering the list in her hand. "Is everybody out?" she asked. Malcolm looked across the volunteers, children, and staff gathered under the awning. "Everybody." Lily finally wrapped her arms around him. Malcolm held her for a moment, then returned his attention to the building as emergency inspectors arrived. An older structural engineer examined the exposed framing from a safe distance and compared it with the project documents. He shone a light across the support braces, then ran one gloved hand along the untreated wood. "These were never replaced," he said. "There would be new bolt holes, fresh hardware, and visible installation marks. None of that is here." Evelyn looked down at the wet storage box Malcolm had carried out. A contractor label remained attached to one side. The code ended in 47, matching the suspicious number on the work order Malcolm had shown her earlier, not the 74 printed on the crew sign left at the site. One mismatch could have been carelessness. 2 matching records tied to work that had never happened felt deliberate. As lightning flickered beyond the parking lot, Evelyn placed both hands on the box and understood that the damaged roof might be only the first thing someone had tried to hide. By morning, she intended to learn exactly what those files contained. By 8 the next morning, the storm had moved beyond Atlanta, leaving wet streets, fallen branches, and a line of unanswered questions inside the Whitmore Foundation headquarters. Evelyn sat alone in a glass-walled conference room with the rescued Haven House files spread across the table. Most of the folders were damp along the edges, but the records inside were readable. She compared contractor invoices, inspection reports, and payment approvals until a pattern began to emerge. Several signatures had been dated after the employees listed beside them had already left the foundation. One consulting firm appeared repeatedly in the approval chain despite having no direct role in construction. Holloway Strategic Advisory. The name was familiar enough to make her stop. It was connected to the same investment network controlled by Grant Holloway's family. The evidence did not prove wrongdoing, but it was too specific to ignore. Evelyn called the foundation's legal director and requested an independent forensic audit of every Haven House transaction. including archived emails, server access logs, contractor records, and outside consulting payments. No internal review, she said. I want people who do not answer to my father, the board, or me. Less than an hour later, Charles Whitmore summoned her upstairs. He stood beside the windows of his executive office, Atlantis still gray behind him, and placed a leather folder on the desk. Inside were profiles of 3 men from families with long business histories, political influence, and enough wealth to make the board feel secure. Grant's photograph was on top. Charles spoke without raising his voice. The gala is in 3 weeks. By then, the board expects clarity about the succession plan. Evelyn closed the folder. You mean clarity about my personal life? I mean confidence, Charles replied. He explained that the family's voting shares remained inside a trust established after an old leadership battle nearly tore Whitmore Development Group apart. The board could delay transferring full operational control if they believed the next leader presented a governance risk. Charles believed a public engagement to someone respected by the board would calm investors and secure the votes Evelyn needed. Grant is the strongest choice, he said. His family's credit facility is helping hold off the acquisition group circling our real estate division. A formal alliance would end the uncertainty. Evelyn looked at him carefully. You are asking me to use marriage as a financing strategy. Charles did not deny it. I am asking you to understand that leadership has consequences beyond personal preference. She thought about Haven House, about children counting each other beneath a leaking roof, while someone had approved payments for work that never happened. So does looking away, she said. Charles's expression tightened. Do not confuse one failed project with the future of this company. Evelyn stood. I am beginning to think that is exactly how failures become systems. That afternoon, she returned to Haven House. The building remained closed while engineers documented the damage. Malcolm was outside stacking dry lumber beneath a temporary covering. Lily sat nearby on an overturned bucket with a box of crayons, while Mrs. June Carter spoke with 2 volunteers. Malcolm glanced up when Evelyn approached, but did not stop working. The records show. More than bad construction, she said. There are signatures that do not belong, payments that do not match, and a consulting firm connected to people my family trusts. Malcolm set down the board in his hands. Then keep following the paperwork until it matches what happened here. Evelyn looked toward the damaged roof. You said yesterday that buildings tell you before they fail. Malcolm wiped the sawdust from his palms. Usually, a door starts sticking. A floor gives a little. A roof leaks in the same place twice. People do it too. They stop answering simple questions. They rush you past details. They tell you not to worry. His tone was practical, not poetic. The warning is there. Most people just hope somebody else deals with it. Evelyn nodded slowly. I ordered a forensic audit this morning. Good. My father wants me to choose a husband before the gala. That made Malcolm look at her fully. She gave a tired smile. Apparently, the board thinks marriage makes people better leaders. Malcolm considered that. A ring can make people look settled. It cannot make them honest. Before Evelyn could answer, Lily hurried over holding a drawing. Haven House stood beneath a bright yellow sun with a new roof, children on the lawn, and 3 uneven figures beside the front steps. One was tall, one wore a blue dress, and the smallest stood between them. This is for you, Lily said. Evelyn studied the picture. Who are these 3? Lily pointed carefully. Daddy, me, and you. You helped yesterday. The words were simple, but they landed somewhere Evelyn had kept guarded for years. Her phone rang before she could respond. Grant's name appeared on the screen. She answered. His voice was warm, controlled, and almost tender. I heard Charles spoke with you. Have dinner with me tonight. We should discuss stability before the board turns uncertainty into a decision neither of us can control. Evelyn looked from the damaged building to Malcolm, then down at Lily's drawing. Grant spoke as though every problem had a price, every relationship a function, every person a position to be managed. Malcolm had stood beneath a failing roof and asked for nothing. In that moment, Evelyn understood that if she was going to survive the next 3 weeks without becoming another asset in her father's strategy, she needed someone beside her whom neither Charles nor Grant could purchase. By the time Grant asked whether she was still listening, Evelyn had already decided where she would go after sunset. By the time Evelyn reached Malcolm's house that evening, the porch light was already on and the smell of warm cornbread drifted through the open kitchen window. Malcolm answered the door wearing a faded work shirt with sawdust still caught near one cuff. He looked surprised to see her, but not impressed, and that was part of why she had come. Inside, the small two-bedroom house felt lived in rather than decorated. Family photographs covered one wall, most of them showing Malcolm and Lily at school fairs, neighborhood cookouts, and summer baseball games. Naomi appeared in several older pictures, smiling beside them with the kind of presence that had never fully left the room. Lily sat at the kitchen table finishing her homework, while Mrs. June Carter stood near the stove wrapping 2 pieces of cornbread in foil. "I was just taking Lily next door for an hour," Mrs. Carter said, studying Evelyn with kind but careful eyes. Malcolm shook his head. "You do not have to leave." Evelyn glanced toward Lily. "Actually, what I need to discuss affects her too. But Malcolm should hear it first." Mrs. Carter nodded and led Lily next door after Malcolm promised to call her back before bedtime. Once they were alone, Malcolm poured iced tea into 2 mason jars and waited. Evelyn placed a sealed envelope on the table between them. He did not touch it. "I need you to hear the whole request before you answer," she said. "That usually means the answer should be no," Malcolm replied. Evelyn almost smiled, but the weight of the conversation would not allow it. "The gala is less than 3 weeks away. My father and the board are pushing me toward Grant Holloway because they believe his family can stabilize the company and secure the succession vote. The forensic audit is underway, but it needs time. If I let them announce Grant as the expected choice, he gains influence over the foundation before we know what happened at Haven House." Malcolm looked at the envelope. "And what does that have to do with me? I need someone standing beside me whom Charles, Grant, and the board cannot control with money. Someone the public already recognizes as honest because of what happened during the storm. Your presence would force them to delay any decision involving Grant while the audit continues." Malcolm's expression hardened, though his voice remained calm. "You want me to pretend to be the man you chose?" Evelyn nodded. "Only until the gala and the audit are complete." Malcolm leaned back. No, he did not ask what was inside the envelope. He did not calculate the amount or consider bargaining. He simply pushed it toward her with 2 fingers. "My daughter has already lost her mother. I will not let her believe a family is forming when it is only a strategy. The envelope contains compensation for your time and whatever work you might lose." "That makes it worse." Evelyn removed the envelope from the table. "Then forget the money." Malcolm stood and walked toward the window overlooking the small front yard. Lily's bicycle rested beside Naomi's flower bed. "You understand what this could cost me?" he asked. "Clients may decide I am chasing attention. Reporters could dig through my finances. The bank could take another look at my mortgage if rumors start affecting my work. And Lily could hear people say things about her father that she is too young to understand." Evelyn answered quietly. "I understand enough to know I cannot ask you to carry those risks without being honest about them." Malcolm turned toward her. "Why me, really?" "Because you warned people before the roof failed. Because you protected children without asking who would notice. Because when I told you about my father's pressure, you did not offer to rescue me or use it as leverage. And because you are the only man in this situation who gains nothing from controlling me." The room stayed silent for several seconds. Malcolm looked at Naomi's photograph, then at the mortgage notice partially hidden beneath a stack of mail. The money would have helped. That fact did not weaken him. It made refusing it mean more. "There would be conditions," he finally said. Evelyn sat straighter. "First, Lily hears the truth from both of us. We may perform for adults, but we do not lie to her. Second, no photographs, interviews, or sympathy stories built around my daughter. Third, every Haven House transaction becomes part of a public independent audit. No private settlement and no quiet cleanup. Fourth, the moment you choose convenience over truth, Lily and I walk away, even if the gala is 5 minutes from starting." Evelyn nodded after each condition. "Agreed." Malcolm went next door and returned with Lily and Mrs. Carter. He sat beside his daughter at the kitchen table while Evelyn explained in simple words that some powerful people were trying to make decisions for her before she had all the facts. Malcolm told Lily they might need to act like Evelyn had chosen him, but nothing would happen without Lily knowing what was real. Lily looked from her father to Evelyn. "So you will pretend for them, but not for me?" "That is right," Evelyn said. Malcolm extended his hand across the table. Evelyn took it, sealing an agreement that felt more serious than any contract she had signed. Then Malcolm looked at Lily. She studied Evelyn for a moment before asking, "Will you keep your promises?" Outside, a dark sedan waited beneath a streetlight at the end of the block. As Evelyn answered yes, the car eased away from the curb and disappeared into the Atlanta night. The first public appearance came 4 days later at a press conference announcing the rebuilding of Haven House. Malcolm arrived in the same navy suit he had rented for a cousin's wedding nearly 3 years earlier. It was clean and carefully pressed, but the sleeves stopped a little above his wrists. Evelyn was waiting beside the entrance with a garment bag draped over one arm. Malcolm looked at it, then at her. "Mine still works," he said. Evelyn followed his gaze to the bag and understood immediately. "I am sorry. I should have asked before bringing it." She placed the bag back inside her car. "Would you be comfortable if I had the sleeves on your suit adjusted instead?" "Nothing else." Malcolm considered the question. She was not insisting, explaining, or trying to reshape him into someone the board would find easier to accept. "The sleeves only," he said. "The sleeves only," Evelyn promised. Inside the conference hall, reporters crowded behind rows of folding chairs while foundation staff prepared statements at the front. Charles Whitmore stood with several board members near the stage. Grant Holloway remained beside them, composed and watchful. When Evelyn entered with Malcolm and Lily, the cameras shifted toward them at once. Malcolm felt Lily's fingers tighten around his hand. He leaned down slightly. "You stay close to me. We leave whenever you want." Lily nodded. "I am okay." Evelyn stepped to the podium and announced that Haven House would be rebuilt under independent supervision. She confirmed that a forensic audit had already begun and that no new payment would be released until auditors reviewed every invoice, approval, contractor record, and electronic access log connected to the project. The room stirred at the word forensic. Charles's expression remained controlled. Grant's did not change until an assistant handed him the printed press packet. His eyes stopped on one line beneath Malcolm's photograph. "Malcolm Reed, independent carpenter and restoration contractor." Grant read the name twice, then leaned toward his assistant. "Find out whether his wife was Naomi Reed," he said quietly. The assistant looked surprised. Grant did not explain. Near the back wall, a man with a press badge aimed his camera toward the stage, but he photographed Malcolm and Lily far more often than Evelyn or the damaged building displayed on the screens. He captured Lily looking up at her father, Malcolm adjusting the collar of her dress, and Evelyn standing close enough to appear connected to both of them. Malcolm noticed the lens following Lily and shifted slightly, placing himself between her and the camera. Evelyn then invited him to speak. Malcolm approached the microphone without trying to look comfortable. "I am not an engineer, and I am not here to tell anyone how to run a foundation," he said. "I work on buildings. When something is wrong, you fix it before people get hurt." The children inside Haven House mattered more than the report saying everything was fine. That is all. His words were plain, almost too simple for a room filled with lawyers, executives, and prepared statements. Yet the silence that followed carried more respect than applause. Afterward, several parents thanked Malcolm. He accepted their gratitude, then checked his watch because Lily's art class began across town in less than an hour. Evelyn watched him leave before the reporters could surround him. Grant watched too, the press packet still folded beneath his hand. That evening, Evelyn brought renovation blueprints to Malcolm's house. She found him and Lily on the front porch building a birdhouse from leftover cedar. An old radio played softly near the window while the last sunlight settled across the yard. Lily held 2 pieces together as Malcolm showed her how to keep the edges even. On the small table beside them sat a worn wooden music box with faded flowers painted across the lid. Evelyn glanced at it. Malcolm followed her eyes. "It belonged to Naomi," he said. "Lily keeps it close." He offered nothing more, and Evelyn did not ask. Lily dipped her brush into blue paint and looked at Evelyn. "Did you ever build something with your dad?" Evelyn paused. The question was simple enough to make pretending impossible. "No," she said. "We did not do things like this." Lily looked toward the birdhouse. "You can help with this one." Evelyn sat beside her and held the cedar steady while Lily painted the word home across the front. Malcolm watched them without speaking. The moment felt quiet, almost ordinary, and that made it more dangerous than either adult wanted to admit. Evelyn left after dark. Malcolm waited until her car disappeared before walking to the mailbox. Inside was a plain envelope without a stamp or return address. It contained a photograph taken at the press conference, showing Evelyn looking at Malcolm while Lily stood between them. Across the bottom, someone had written a single sentence in black ink. You do not belong in her world. Inevitably, the photographs began spreading long before either Malcolm or Evelyn was ready for what they would trigger. By the following morning, every major business website and entertainment column carried the same images. The billionaire heiress smiling beside an unknown construction contractor. A little girl holding Evelyn's hand outside Haven House. Malcolm speaking quietly at the podium while Evelyn watched from a respectful distance. Most headlines called it an unexpected friendship. Others suggested something more. Social media filled the empty spaces with speculation that moved faster than facts ever could. Some praised Evelyn for stepping outside the world of privilege. Others accused Malcolm of carefully positioning himself to gain access to unimaginable wealth. Malcolm ignored every article. His routine remained unchanged. He drove Lily to school, finished work at Haven House, and returned home before dinner. But he could not ignore what happened when he arrived at Jefferson Elementary that Friday afternoon. As Lily walked toward the pickup area carrying her backpack, another little girl smiled and asked, "Is it true your daddy is going to marry the rich lady from television?" Lily stopped walking. She looked at Malcolm before answering with complete honesty. "I do not know yet." Malcolm gently took her hand and thanked the teacher before driving home. Nearly 10 minutes passed before Lily quietly spoke from the back seat. "Daddy." "Yes, sweetheart." "If grown-ups pretend for a good reason, how do kids know when pretending becomes lying?" Malcolm tightened his hands around the steering wheel. It was exactly the question he had hoped would never come. "By telling the truth as soon as you can," he answered softly. "And by making sure nobody gets hurt because you waited too long." Lily looked out the window. "Miss Evelyn does not seem like someone who lies." "No," Malcolm said. "She does not." Across town, Evelyn faced a different storm. The Whitmore board had called an emergency meeting after investors began asking whether rumors surrounding her personal life would affect the upcoming succession vote. Grant Holloway entered the boardroom carrying a folder thicker than the meeting agenda. His voice remained calm, almost sympathetic. "I am concerned that Evelyn may be placing the company in an unnecessarily vulnerable position." Charles remained silent while Grant distributed photographs collected over the past week. Malcolm working construction. Malcolm carrying lumber. Malcolm driving an old pickup truck. Malcolm leaving a grocery store with discount bags. None of the photographs were embarrassing. They simply emphasized the enormous difference between the two worlds. Grant continued, "This is not about character. It is about perception. Investors expect stability, not uncertainty." Evelyn looked around the room. Nobody questioned Malcolm's honesty. They questioned whether someone without wealth belonged beside her. The realization disappointed her more than she expected. After the meeting ended, Charles asked her to remain behind. He closed the conference room door before speaking. "Tell me the truth. Are these rumors serious?" Evelyn answered carefully. "I respect Malcolm Reed more than almost anyone I have ever met." Charles nodded slowly. "That was not my question." She held his gaze. "Then maybe you asked the wrong one." Charles walked toward the window overlooking the city. "Do you know what happens if the board loses confidence before the gala? Thousands of employees begin wondering whether their future remains secure. Markets react. Partners hesitate. Sometimes leadership requires sacrificing personal feelings." Evelyn quietly replied, "Maybe leadership also requires sacrificing pride." Charles said nothing more. Meanwhile, Grant made a decision that revealed far more about his character than any board meeting ever could. He hired a private investigator to examine every corner of Malcolm's past, convinced that somewhere there had to be a mistake, a scandal, or a secret that could destroy his credibility. Days later, the investigator delivered a thick file. Grant opened it expecting triumph. Instead, he found years of ordinary tax records, construction permits, volunteer work, neighborhood recommendations, school attendance logs, and dozens of letters from families Malcolm had quietly helped after storms damaged their homes. One handwritten note from an elderly widow simply read, "He repaired my porch after the tornado and refused every dollar I offered. He said my homemade peach pie was enough." Grant slammed the folder shut. There was nothing to expose because Malcolm had spent years living exactly the way he appeared to live. That frustrated Grant more than any hidden scandal could have. Unable to find dirt, he chose something easier. He began creating doubt. Select photographs were anonymously leaked beside carefully worded rumors suggesting Malcolm had deliberately pursued Evelyn after learning who she was. Anonymous online accounts questioned the timing of their meetings. Television commentators debated whether love could truly exist between people whose lives looked so different. Evelyn recognized the campaign immediately, but proving who stood behind it was another matter entirely. Late that evening, she drove to Malcolm's house without calling first. She found him sitting alone on the porch after Lily had gone to sleep. The little blue birdhouse still rested near the steps. Evelyn sat beside him without speaking for nearly a full minute. Finally, she whispered, "I am sorry. None of this should be happening to you or Lily." Malcolm looked toward the quiet street where porch lights glowed one by one. "People are allowed to misunderstand me," he said calmly. "What worries me is when they start misunderstanding my daughter." Evelyn lowered her eyes. "Maybe we should end this before it hurts her." Malcolm remained silent for a long moment before answering. "If walking away protects Lily, I will do it tonight. But if walking away gives dishonest people exactly what they wanted, then maybe the harder choice is staying long enough to finish what we started." Unknown to either of them, a camera hidden across the street captured that quiet conversation from a distance, and by sunrise another photograph would be waiting to ignite an even greater misunderstanding. The porch photograph appeared online shortly after 6 the next morning, cropped tightly enough to make a quiet conversation look like a secret meeting. By 8, satellite trucks lined the street outside Malcolm's neighborhood. Reporters repeated questions no one had answered, and every business channel in Atlanta was debating whether Evelyn Whitmore had placed the future of her family company in the hands of a man she had known for less than 3 weeks. Malcolm left through the back alley to take Lily to Jefferson Elementary, shielding her from the cameras without offering a statement. Across town, Evelyn entered the Whitmore Foundation boardroom and found Charles at the head of the table, Grant beside the main display, and the independent forensic auditor already connected by video from New York. The audit Evelyn ordered after the Haven House storm had expanded overnight. Grant pointed toward the porch image on the screen. "This is no longer a private distraction," he said evenly. "Investors are questioning judgment, donors are questioning stability, and the board cannot separate perception from risk." Evelyn remained standing. "Then perhaps the board should spend less time studying photographs and more time studying altered invoices." Before Grant could answer, Margaret Whitmore entered carrying a gray archival box sealed with brittle evidence tape. She placed it beside Evelyn. "The auditors requested every legal storage record connected to the old construction subsidiaries," she explained. "This was filed under Westbridge Community Holdings, a company that stopped operating years ago. The archive code was wrong." The auditor confirmed that Westbridge had once hired Naomi Reed as an outside accounting consultant. After Naomi died, the contents had been marked pending verification, then transferred by mistake into an inactive records room at the Whitmore estate. Because the file was coded under the defunct subsidiary instead of the foundation, no later review had searched for it. Margaret opened the box. Inside were original Haven House invoices, handwritten comparison sheets, and a small digital recorder wrapped in a cloth pouch. Evelyn stared at Naomi's name written across one folder. For a moment, the boardroom disappeared, replaced by the memory of Lily protecting the faded music box on Malcolm's porch. Charles lowered his eyes. "Play it," he said. Naomi's voice entered the room, quiet but steady. She explained that several invoices had been changed after leaving her desk. Payment totals no longer matched contractor submissions. A consulting authorization linked to Holloway Capital appeared repeatedly in files where it had no clear operational purpose. She did not accuse Grant directly. Instead, she said she feared someone inside Whitmore was protecting the process and preventing questions from reaching senior leadership. The forensic auditor then shared his screen. Metadata showed that a foundation finance manager had altered the digital records months after Naomi's review. Backup logs confirmed the original amounts. Temporary access for those changes had been approved from an executive office assigned to Grant during the proposed financing partnership. Grant remained controlled. "Temporary access does not prove direction," he said. "My office coordinated restructuring work across several divisions." The auditor nodded. "That is correct. It does not prove who ordered the changes. It does prove the alterations were not accidental." Another document appeared on the screen. Holloway Capital had quietly evaluated Haven House and 3 surrounding properties as a failed community asset zone. If the center lost funding and the neighborhood declined further, the land could be acquired below market value for a development project backed by Grant's investment group. The same project would strengthen Holloway Capital's leverage over Whitmore Development Group and make Evelyn more dependent on the strategic marriage Charles favored. Grant folded his hands. You call it leverage. I call it protecting thousands of jobs from a hostile acquisition. Haven House was one underperforming property in a portfolio large enough to affect an entire company. Evelyn looked at him with disbelief. Children were standing under a roof that had never been repaired. Grant's expression tightened. I did not authorize unsafe work. I authorized financial options when your foundation refused to make difficult decisions. Charles turned away from the table. Years earlier, Naomi had sent a preliminary warning to his office about unusual project costs. He had asked staff to delay a full review until after a major bond offering, afraid that public questions would weaken Whitmore stock. He had never seen the altered invoices, but he had chosen timing over truth. I told myself I was protecting the company, Charles said quietly. What I protected was my ability not to know. The admission changed the room. He faced Grant and spoke without anger. You will leave this meeting. Your access to Whitmore systems is suspended while independent investigators review every transaction. Grant stood slowly. Be careful, Charles. Removing me may satisfy this room, but it does not remove the people waiting to take your company apart. Then we will face them without hiding behind children who needed a safe roof, Charles replied. Grant gathered his papers and left, still composed, still convinced that history might eventually justify him. After the door closed, Margaret handed Evelyn Naomi's handwritten notes. One line stopped her cold. I will speak with Malcolm tonight. He understands why unfinished accusations can hurt innocent people. Evelyn read it twice. Malcolm had known Naomi reviewed the foundation. He had stood beside her through the storm, the audit, and every accusation without mentioning it. She remembered the music box on the porch, the way he had answered nothing when she asked about Naomi, and the words he had spoken beneath the gala lights before the story turned backward in time. Before you choose me, there is something you deserve to know. For the first time, Evelyn understood that Malcolm's secret was not about money, status, or ambition. It was about a promise he had carried for 6 years, and she no longer knew whether that promise had protected her or kept her from the truth. Evelyn found Malcolm that afternoon at Haven House, sanding the cedar sign beneath a temporary awning while Lily sorted paintbrushes nearby. He looked up once and understood from her expression that the audit had uncovered more than missing money. She handed him a copy of Naomi's notes. You knew she had reviewed the foundation. Malcolm set the sandpaper down. I knew she found numbers that did not make sense. She never had enough proof to accuse anyone. Evelyn's voice tightened. You stood beside me through all of this and said nothing. Naomi asked me not to release unfinished notes. She was afraid people would choose a villain before they found the truth, and innocent employees would lose everything. He looked toward Lily. After she died, I kept that promise. I also kept Lily away from a fight I could not prove. Evelyn was hurt, but there was no greed hidden in his explanation. He had never asked for money, influence, or protection. That was what you meant at the gala, she said. Before I chose you. Malcolm nodded. I was going to tell you that Naomi had touched this story long before either of us understood it. Evelyn looked away. You should have trusted me sooner. You are right. Lily approached slowly, having heard only the last few words. She looked at her father. Daddy, keeping a promise to Mom does not mean you have to hide things from people who are here. Malcolm studied his daughter, then nodded. No, it does not. That evening, Charles transferred the audit files to independent investigators and the proper authorities. Grant's system access remained suspended, but no one declared him guilty. He continued insisting that every decision had been intended to protect Whitmore Development Group from acquisition and preserve thousands of jobs. Charles answered that strategy did not excuse secrecy, and survival did not justify placing families beneath an unsafe roof. Before the gala, Charles informed Evelyn that his attorneys had withdrawn the unsigned trust proposal. He would no longer use marriage as evidence of stability. Her succession plan would go before the board under public, measurable standards of performance and accountability. At the gala, Charles stood beneath the chandeliers and admitted that he had delayed Naomi's early warning because he feared market consequences. He announced independent oversight for every foundation project and accepted responsibility without asking the room to forgive him. Then Evelyn stepped forward. "I will not earn leadership by marrying the person this board considers safest," she said. "Judge me by my decisions, including this one." She publicly ended the arrangement with Malcolm and withdrew any claim that their relationship should influence the succession vote. Then she walked through the ballroom until she reached him and Lily. "Now that the agreement is over," she said, "I choose you." Malcolm held her gaze. "Are you choosing me, or are you still fighting your father?" Evelyn removed the Whitmore voting proxy from her purse and handed it to Margaret. "I am giving up every advantage this announcement could bring me. The board will decide my future without using you as proof of anything." Only then did Malcolm reach for her hand. Months later, Haven House reopened with a new roof, expanded classrooms, and a woodworking program Malcolm led for single parents and teenagers. He still drove the same truck and worked with the same hands. Above the entrance hung the cedar sign he and Lily had made. "No one who enters here will be measured by what they own." Charles spent the afternoon building a birdhouse beside Lily, listening carefully when she corrected his crooked measurements. Near sunset, Lily brought Naomi's music box to Evelyn. "Mom stays," she said softly. "You can stay too." Evelyn accepted it with both hands. The melody began, quiet and familiar, while Malcolm drew Lily close and Evelyn stood beside them. Love had not replaced Naomi or erased the years before. It had simply made room for truth, forgiveness, and a family choosing one another without money, fear, or obligation.